Have you ever watched someone get humiliated in public and thought, they're going to regret this? That's exactly what happened one Tuesday morning at the Grand Meridian Hotel in downtown Vancouver. And I need you to stay with me until the end, because what unfolded in that lobby changed every single person who witnessed it. Marcus Webb was 43 years old, black, and looked like he had absolutely no business being inside the Grand Meridian. He was wearing a faded gray hoodie, dark wash jeans with a small tear near the left knee, and a pair of worn New Balance runners that had seen better days. He carried no briefcase, no designer bag, just an old navy backpack slung over one shoulder and a paper cup of Tim Hortons coffee in his hand. His hair needed a trim. His face was calm, not the calm of someone who was nervous and hiding it, but the calm of someone who had absolutely nothing to prove. He walked through the revolving glass doors at 8:47 in the morning and stood in the lobby for a moment, looking around like he was orienting himself. That was when Kyle Braddock noticed him. Kyle Braddock was 26, white, and had been working the front desk at the Grand Meridian for 14 months. He had a sharp side-part haircut and a name tag that he wore slightly tilted, which he seemed to think made him look approachable. He prided himself on reading people. He told his coworkers this often. "You can tell in the first 3 seconds," he would say. 3 seconds, and I know exactly what kind of guest I'm dealing with. Kyle looked at Marcus Webb and made his assessment in fewer than 3. He leaned over to his colleague, Priya Sandhu, and said quietly, "Watch this one." Marcus walked to the front desk. He set his Tim Hortons cup on the counter, not aggressively, just set it down, and looked at Kyle. "Good morning," Marcus said. "I have a reservation under Webb." Kyle smiled the smile of someone who had already decided the answer before the question was asked. He typed slowly. He frowned at the screen. He typed again. "I'm not seeing anything under that name, sir. Try Marcus Webb, or M.E. Webb." More slow typing. Kyle glanced at Priya. Priya looked at her own screen. "I'm seeing a reservation," Kyle said carefully, "but this suite is listed under a corporate account. The Elliott Group." He looked up. "Are you with the Elliott Group?" "Yes," Marcus said. "And you're an employee. Or, I'm Marcus Webb. Right? But I mean..." Kyle lowered his voice, like he was doing Marcus a favor by not embarrassing him louder. "This is the Meridian Suite, sir. It's our executive floor. The rate for this room is $4,200 a night. I just want to make sure there hasn't been some kind of mix-up." Marcus looked at him for a moment, not angry, not defensive, just looked at him. "There's no mix-up," Marcus said. Kyle straightened up. "Company policy requires us to verify identity for all executive bookings. Do you have a corporate card and a government-issued ID?" Marcus reached into the front pocket of his backpack and placed his driver's license on the counter without a word. Kyle examined it. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the ID again. He handed it back. "And the corporate card? The room is already paid in full," Marcus said. "Pre-authorized. It should say that in your system." Kyle turned back to his screen. He was quiet for longer than necessary. "I see that it's pre-authorized, but I'm going to need to contact our reservations manager before I can proceed." "It's just standard procedure for what?" Marcus said. Still calm. Still quiet. Kyle smiled again, that tight, practiced smile. "For bookings of this level, just to make sure everything is in order. It'll only take a few minutes." Marcus nodded once. He picked up his Tim Hortons cup. He stepped back from the counter and stood there in the lobby, holding his coffee, while Kyle got on the phone. Priya watched Marcus from the corner of her eye. Something was wrong. She didn't know exactly what, but she had been at that desk for 3 years, and she knew when the policy was being applied and when it was being used as a tool. This felt like the second thing. She said nothing. She would think about that later. Kyle spoke to the reservations manager, a woman named Diane Fothergill, in a low voice. He explained the discrepancy. He used words like unusual and just want to be careful. Diane told him she'd come down. Diane Fothergill was 51, the kind of woman who had built her career on detail and discretion, and she crossed the lobby quickly in her dark blazer. She smiled at Marcus with the same quality of smile Kyle had used, the same temperature. "Mr. Webb, is it? I'm Diane, reservations manager. I understand there's been some confusion about your booking." "No confusion," Marcus said pleasantly. "We just want to make sure everything is in order before we get you settled. The Meridian Suite is our most premium accommodation, and we have certain protocols." "You don't run these protocols for every guest?" Diane paused. "We run them when it's appropriate." "I see," Marcus said. He took a slow sip of his coffee. Diane proceeded to ask him 3 more questions: the name of the company, the contact who made the booking, the expected duration of his stay. Marcus answered all 3 in a single breath, without looking at anything, without hesitation. Diane typed on the tablet she had carried down. She frowned slightly. She typed again. "And the purpose of your stay?" she asked. Marcus considered this for a moment. Then he said, "I own the building." Diane's fingers stopped moving. The lobby wasn't loud. It was the kind of lobby that absorbed sound: high ceilings, marble floors, thick carpeting in the seating areas. But in the 4 seconds that followed Marcus saying those 4 words, it got very, very quiet. "I'm sorry?" Diane said. Marcus reached into his backpack again. He took out a slim leather wallet, and from it he removed a small card. He placed it on the desk in front of Diane the way someone places a card when they've had this conversation before and they're tired of having it. Diane picked it up. Marcus Elliott Webb, Chief Executive Officer, Meridian Hospitality Group, Meridian Hospitality Group, as in the parent company of the Grand Meridian Hotel, as in the company that owned not just this building but 11 other hotels across British Columbia and Alberta, as in the name on the lease of the ground beneath Diane Fothergill's feet. Diane looked at the card. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Kyle, who had gone the color of uncooked pastry. "Mr. Webb," Diane started. I had no idea, I know," Marcus said, and then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, held up one finger to Diane, and answered, "Yeah, tell them I'll be up in 10 minutes." He hung up. He looked back at the desk. "If it's not too much trouble," he said, with no particular edge in his voice, "I'd like my room key now." Kyle's hands were shaking slightly as he prepared the key cards. He slid them across the counter in a small paper sleeve. His mouth opened. He was trying to say something, an apology, an explanation, some version of "I didn't mean it like that," but nothing came out. Marcus took the key cards. He picked up his backpack. He picked up his Tim Hortons cup. He looked at Kyle for a moment, that same steady look. "Thank you," Marcus said, and he walked to the elevator. The lobby stayed quiet for another 3 seconds after the elevator doors closed. Then someone at the concierge desk exhaled. A guest near the fireplace seating area had looked up from his laptop at some point during all of this and now quietly looked back down. Priya stared at her screen. A bellman near the luggage cart pretended to be busy with a zipper. Kyle stood at the front desk and did not move for a long time. What Kyle didn't know, what neither he nor Diane knew that morning, was that Marcus hadn't come to the Grand Meridian for a regular stay. He had come because he was conducting a quiet review. Marcus Elliott Webb had built the Meridian Hospitality Group over 17 years, starting with a single 40-room property in Kelowna that he had bought at 26 with money he had saved, working double shifts in hotel kitchens throughout his early 20s. He had grown up in Scarborough, Ontario, in a household where his mother worked 2 jobs and his father wasn't around, and he had learned very early what it meant to be underestimated. He had also learned what it meant to pay attention. 3 weeks before that Tuesday morning, he had received a complaint. Not a formal review, not a public comment, a private message forwarded to him by his assistant from a guest who had stayed in one of the standard rooms. The guest, a black woman in her 60s named Catherine Adeyemi, had written a careful and measured email describing an experience at the front desk that had left her feeling, in her words, like a suspect in a place I had paid good money to be. Marcus had read that email 3 times. He had been thinking about expanding the hotel's executive training program for months. He had been hearing things, patterns, The kind of subtle friction that didn't show up in satisfaction scores, but lived in the gaps between them. He decided he needed to see it for himself. He had his assistant book the Meridian Suite under his corporate account, exactly as any legitimate guest might, and he had shown up in his ordinary clothes, with his ordinary coffee, and waited to see what would happen. It took 8 minutes and 43 seconds for the intervention to begin. He had timed it on his phone while standing at the counter. He also knew that a group of 7 people, including 2 junior managers from the hotel's operations team, had been watching the interaction from the mezzanine level. They had been positioned up there as part of the review. They had watched everything. One of them, a young woman named Adeze Okafor, had nearly come down the stairs 3 minutes in. She had gripped the railing and stayed put only because Marcus had specifically instructed the team not to intervene. "Let it play out," he had told them. "I need to see all of it." All of it had played out. That afternoon, Marcus met with the hotel's general manager, Robert Cho, in a private meeting room on the 14th floor. Robert was 55, Korean-Canadian, a meticulous and generally well-regarded manager who had been running the Grand Meridian for 6 years. He sat across from Marcus with the careful posture of someone who had already been told what the morning had involved. Marcus placed a printed document on the table. It was 12 pages long. It outlined in specific detail what had happened at the front desk, what it reflected about training gaps, what it cost the company in terms of guest trust, and what he intended to do about it. "Kyle Braddock," Marcus said, "will be placed on a performance improvement plan immediately. He will complete mandatory bias awareness training within 30 days. If the behavior is not corrected, his employment will be terminated." "That's not negotiable." Robert nodded. Diane Fothergill escalated a situation that should never have reached escalation. She will also complete the training. She stays for now, but she is on notice. Robert nodded again. "I want a full audit of guest interaction logs for the past 18 months. I want to know if Catherine Adeyemi's experience was an anomaly or a pattern. My instinct says it's a pattern." "I believe you're right," Robert said quietly. Marcus looked at him. "You knew." Robert was quiet for a moment. "I suspected. I didn't act with enough urgency. That's also going to change." What Marcus did not do, in that meeting or in any communication that followed, was make the incident public. He had been advised by 2 people on his team to consider going public. The story, they said, would generate significant media attention and position Marcus personally as a figure of accountability and change. Marcus had listened to this advice, thought about it overnight, and said, "No, I'm not interested in the story," he told them. "I'm interested in fixing the thing." That was Marcus Elliott Webb. What did spread, quietly, the way things spread in tightly knit professional communities, was the account from the 7 people on the mezzanine. They talked. Not maliciously, not publicly, but they talked. Hotel staff heard. People in the industry heard. Within 2 weeks, the story had moved through Vancouver's hospitality sector the way water moves through rock, slowly, and into every crack. Kyle Braddock heard, from a colleague at a competing hotel, that word had gotten around. He sat with that for a long time. Priya Sandhu requested a meeting with Robert Cho 3 days after the incident. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and said, "I knew something was wrong and I didn't say anything. I want to be part of fixing that." She became one of the first members of the hotel's newly formed Guest Experience Equity Committee, a body that Marcus established with a proper budget and a mandate to report directly to him. Marcus came back to the Grand Meridian 2 months later. He walked through the revolving doors in the same gray hoodie, the same worn runners. He carried the same navy backpack. There was a different person at the front desk, a young man named Theo, 22, who had started after the incident and had gone through the revised onboarding program. Theo looked up when Marcus approached the counter, smiled, a real smile, not a measured one, and said, "Good morning. Checking in today?" "Checking in," Marcus said. "Name? Webb." Theo typed. His face was open and easy. "Marcus, welcome back to the Grand Meridian. I have you in the Meridian Suite." Is there anything I can help you with before I get you your keys?" Marcus looked at him for a moment, the same quiet look, but this time there was something slightly different in it. "No," Marcus said. "That's everything." He took his keys and walked to the elevator. He pressed the button for the executive floor and stood there with his Tim Hortons cup and his backpack. And when the doors opened, he stepped inside, and the lobby went back to its ordinary Tuesday morning sounds. A guest near the fireplace typed on a laptop. The concierge answered a phone call. Theo helped the next person in line. Everything looked the same as it had 2 months ago. But it wasn't. I want to be honest with you. Stories like this one, about a man who was underestimated, who said nothing, who didn't raise his voice, who simply waited for the truth to do its own work. These stories feel satisfying because they end the way we want things to end. And sometimes that makes us forget that most people in Marcus Webb's position never get the ending. They just get the lobby. They get the tight smile and the slow typing and the questions that aren't really questions. And they leave, and nothing changes. What made Marcus different wasn't that he was powerful. It's that he used the power he had in a way that most powerful people don't. He used it to fix something. He could have fired everyone in that lobby and moved on. He chose to build a committee. He chose the audit. He chose the email from Catherine Adeyemi over the story about himself. That's the part that stays with me. If you've ever walked into a room and been looked at the way Marcus was looked at that morning, like you didn't belong, like you'd made some kind of mistake just by showing up, I want you to know that what they were seeing wasn't you. It was their own failure of imagination, and if you're the person behind the counter, 3 seconds is not enough time to know anything about anyone. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment below. Tell me about a time you were underestimated, or a time you caught yourself underestimating someone else. I read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today, and if you haven't yet, subscribe to DELL Stories, because this is exactly the kind of story we're here to tell. The truth doesn't always arrive in a suit. Sometimes it arrives in a gray hoodie, holding a Tim Hortons coffee, completely calm, just waiting for you to finish.